So good afternoon and welcome to NC Tech's Focus on Talent webinar with Abler 360. More than compliance, the importance of digital accessibility. I'm Andrea Fleming, Director of Talent and Workforce Development for NC Tech. I'm really happy to have you all join us today. We're definitely trying something new. We're coming to you live from Burt Media in Morrisville, and hopefully it'll be a really dynamic conversation among our panelists. So a little bit about NC Tech. We're a not-for-profit, membership-driven trade association and the primary voice of technology for the state of North Carolina. We do our work in four major areas: professional networks, government affairs, sector promotion, and talent development. We have about 600 members, and those members employ about 300 individuals across the state of North Carolina. So talent and workforce development are key areas of focus for NC Tech. An organization's success depends on its people and having a strong future tech talent pipeline. Tech companies in particular have that need because their skills are always evolving and evolving very quickly. So we host these talent and workforce development sessions during the year. We've had topics like education and the role of the community college system, accessibility, training and development, women in tech, diversity, recruitment, retention, all kinds of different topics around talent and workforce development. So watch for announcements on those, promotions in our newsletter and on social media. We look forward to hosting you not only at this one, but for others in the future. So during the session today, if you have questions, please use the Q&A feature in Zoom, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end of the session. So today's session, again, is hosted by John Samuel and Mike Iannelli, co-founders of Abler 360, and they're joined by their guest, Ada Lopez, Senior Manager, Product Diversity Office at Lenovo. So Abler's mission. Abler is a full-service disability inclusion organization, and their mission is to remove barriers for all people with disabilities. We do this by eliminating the digital divide, changing the mindsets of people and organizations, and creating pathways to employment. Really happy to have Abler as one of our members and active partners, not only in North Carolina, but across the country. So John will actually be one of our speakers at NC Tech's upcoming Engaging the Future Tech Workplace Summit on March 26th in Durham. I hope many of you can join us at that conference. It's a little bit different. After 5 years of hosting our Diversity, Inclusion, and Tech Summit, we've decided to refresh this event and take a little bit broader focus on employee engagement and culture through a tech lens. Given it was a 5-year mark, it was kind of time to take a step back, look at feedback from our sponsors and our attendees, and better understand the needs of our member organizations and our participating individuals that come to those events. This broader focus will allow us to include topics that are important to our member companies while continuing those important diversity, equity, and inclusion discussions as they're embedded into every aspect of employee engagement. So this year's summit will feature topics such as accessibility, AI, workforce development, building the next tech generation, remote work, and generational engagement. So we've added some interactive sessions to increase engagement and those networking opportunities that everyone loves, and also a reception at the end to really allow attendees to have a chance to really discuss those conversations that were sparked during the day and really build their networks. So that link will be included in the email follow-up from this session, which will also feature contact information for Abler in case you have other questions that come up. So enough about NC Tech. Let's get back to our regularly scheduled program. John, Mike, you two have a lot to cover. I'll let you both introduce yourselves and your guests and get started with why we're here today.
Excellent. Thank you, Andrea. We appreciate NC Tech, your partnership, and thank you all for joining today. This is an exciting topic. The importance of accessibility, and we talk about more than compliance because there are a lot of misnomers in the industry. There are a lot of questions being coined today about what exactly is accessibility, why does it matter, what are the benefits to accessibility, and we thought what better person to have join than Ada Lopez from Lenovo, who is our partner and friend. Hello, Ada. It's nice to see you.
It's nice to be here with you today, Mike, and John, of course.
And I can't forget Johnny Sams. John Samuels is my business partner and our Abler CEO. John and I founded the company in 2020. Andrew kind of mentioned it with the mission of eliminating barriers, educating the world on accessibility and inclusion. And then ultimately, the biggest mission that we have from day one is really creating meaningful career opportunities for people with disabilities. And so we have a really good program there that really focuses on that. So Abler is really built on sort of 3 piers: accessibility, being the largest. And we'll talk a little bit about what that is and how it's different from things that you may have heard of, like automated tools or artificial intelligence, and what is sort of the impact and importance of manual testing using certified accessibility analysts. We'll talk a little about education and awareness. Training is a major component to this, whether you're training development teams or content creators or just educating your organization on inclusion. Very important, and what are the benefits of that? And then that workforce development program. And currently today we've got about an 80% placement rate right now with our workforce development program, which we're super happy about. So let's jump in and get dialed in. We've got some time. I guess I wanted to say a joke, but I guess the joke is over. But it looks like we're between two ferns here, if anybody gets that, as I look at the screen. Let's talk about, John and Ada. You know, we talk about exclusion and inclusion in this world, this word that's floating around quite a bit. But at the end of the day, when you think about business and you think about humanity, when you think about exclusion, it just doesn't seem to make sense. So why, we talk about why it's not good for business and why really accessibility does matter. And when we think about accessibility, we think about this market. Oftentimes it's another misnomer that I don't know anybody with a disability. I don't hire people with disabilities. People with disabilities don't shop. I mean, you'd be amazed on the things that we have heard over the last 5 years. But there's over 1 billion people globally with a disability. 1 in 4 have a disability. And believe it or not, over $8 trillion in a buying power in this community. So, John, let me tee it up to you, my friend. Why does this matter?
No, I appreciate that, Mike. When I think about accessibility, I always say it's not about a line of code, it's about actual people, right? So when we start to think about that, Ada, you and I met at 321 Coffee, which is a coffee shop in Raleigh that employs individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. And, I know Lenovo's been working with them, but Ada, when you and I met, you had already been working in accessibility, doing some really great stuff. But at what point did you realize that having an external partner would be good for your accessibility at Lenovo?
It's great that you bring up the partnership with 321 Coffee, and they're part of Lenovo's Evolve Small program, the way that we invest in our communities and in small businesses. The truth is that Lenovo is a global company in 180 markets. It's a business imperative that we are more inclusive and that we think about accessibility, that we think about the people that are using our products. And Lenovo really has a really long history of being inclusive. If you think about ThinkPad and the keyboard, right? We have the clustering of the function keys because we are thinking about accessibility and about our diverse customer base as we develop our products. We think about consistency. And in order to really bring in innovation, we need to have partners. We need to say, okay, who are our customers? Who are the experts? How can we bring in fresh ideas? What are the needs? What are some of the spaces that maybe we're not considering yet? And really team up with the right individuals, the right partnerships to bring value into these spaces. If you think about 321 Coffee, we were thinking about how can a coffee shop with a new roasting facility implement AI into the process, right? So they were adding software into Lenovo tablets to really help the workforce. And then we think about the work that we do with Abler, right? You bring this incredible specialty on accessibility that, depending on where you are in your maturity, you may not be considering all the factors. Really, what are the advantages to manual testing versus automated testing? There's a lot of talk about accessibility widgets. How does that work? And, when you're a big corporation, there are a lot of ideas, especially on the global scale. And this is where you really need to lean into the topic and bring in some of the experts to say, maybe you have looked at some of these topics and you've explored some of these options, but this is how you get better. This is how you innovate. And it's really by having those trusted partnerships that you really progress.
And Ada, one of the things I really like about this, and I'm so grateful that you're here. You've been such a monumental partner for us and Abler in our mission. But, a lot of times organizations will say things like, well, we have an accessibility team, or we have developers in-house who are studying, or you all have product diversity. You also have some accessibility folks, but you've also decided, what, how do we integrate a third party that does this every single day? And the point you just made is the manual testing side. A certified accessibility team that often, and especially Enabler, are native users, meaning that they actually have disabilities themselves. They use this technology every day. Talk a little bit about that. Like, how did that integration happen? How was it sort of welcomed on the team? Because that's a broad area there to say, hey, we've got this already. We're a huge organization, the largest manufacturer of PCs in the world. And a lot of times an organization that big can say, we don't need anybody. We've got this. But in this case, you were like, you know what? We know what we know. We know what we don't know. We're going to engage with a company here and we're going to do something different. Talk a little bit about that if you could.
Well, Mike, we started by making a really outrageous goal. Part of our publicly stated ESG goal is to vet 75% of all products Lenovo makes through the Product Diversity Office.
Incredible.
It was, especially when you take a look at how big our portfolio is. And in the beginning, it was a phased program, and we were to really embed this diversity by design process throughout the entire development process in the whole company by 2025. And at first, we started with a pilot, and we saw a few projects. And at that point, yes, we had enough staff, and we knew what we knew, and we were so confident. And then when hundreds of products started rolling in, and different kinds of products, and we started seeing different situations that we had not encountered before. How do you scale? You don't scale alone. And that's really what drove us to understand if we want to scale, if we want to really meet our goal, we need our partners. We need expert advice. We need someone who just, a team that just focuses on this area.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's like that, the phrase, if you want to go alone, you can get there faster, but if you want to go far, you go together, right? And I think that's been an amazing thing, having that partnership with y'all, because you're right. I think one thing people need to realize is that accessibility is a journey, and people are going to be at different stages, and it's not a quick
race,
fix, right? It's
yeah.
You have to, it's going to take time, and,
It does,
and we
indeed.
can be there at different parts of the journey. And, we're grateful that Lenovo included us on that journey.
Yeah, and John, you kind of mentioned it. It's not, well, I said it wasn't a race, but but it does. A lot of times people think, hey, I'm just going to plug in something, and we'll get to the widgets, we'll get to the automation here in a little bit. But a lot of times it's just thought either it's too big, it's too much, or I can handle it myself. And when you start to think about the true universal design aspects of it, and that's a word that we use often. It's a lot of times it's, well, we can do things like alt tags. We're changing our alt tags, or we're going to make sure our color contrast works. And by the way, those are great things. Okay, those are necessities. But I think there's always this difference between compliance, which is sort of, I always look at compliance as I'm protecting myself. I need to do this for me. This is somebody that told me that I have to do it, so I have to comply. Then there's access, which is accessibility, which is, okay, how do we create experiences that people can actually get to, right? Can access. And then there's usability, because you can have a compliant site that's not accessible. You can also have an accessible site that's not usable. And so we always talk about the three, right? So if you focus on the usability components, meaning that any human being, whether they're in a wheelchair using a straw to navigate, whether they have an auditory impairment, whether they're using assistive technology like screen readers or magnifiers, the differentiator is that any human being, including those billion people globally, can use the products, the services. They can apply for jobs. They can buy products. So John, just mention that piece too, because I know a lot of times usability gets lost in this. It's like, I got to do this because the law says I have to do this, or I have to do this because I don't want to get sued. And again, this is what we do every day, right? So it's more than a job. It's a mission. It's a passion. But our mission also is to ensure other people get this and understand that there are so many people today that are being excluded. And especially when you think about 2020 with COVID and the web statistics, everybody is using a device. Everyone is using the internet. This is our world today. And when you stop and take a pause and think in reality that there's 1 in 4 people that are not able to access it, there's something wrong with that.
Yeah, for sure. It's not just from the sheer number of people who have a disability. And, when we think about technology, it is the great equalizer for people with disabilities. For myself, as somebody who's blind, to be able to use my phone and to be able to use my computer, it's critical, just like everyone. But, I can't read a piece of paper. I can't use a notepad. I can't see things on a board. And so I'm so reliant on my phone and my computer. And, this goes back to that, what I talked about earlier, is that we have to remember that accessibility isn't just about a line of code. It's actually about actual human experiences. How do you engage with that tool? And so when we think about it at Abler, our motivation is really around creating those usable and accessible experiences that people with disabilities can be successful. And as Mike talked about earlier, we're really thinking about that employment component and, removing that barrier for people who need to use it so that they can actually, go to work, be,
Or have fulfillment, have
fulfillment
meaning,
there, right?
purpose.
Exactly. Purpose, and having that all there in the work and being successful at what they do. And so, Ada, when I think about that, our motivation is really about making sure that we're removing that barrier for people with disabilities to be able to aspect all parts of life. But what is that motivation for y'all to really, embrace accessibility at Lenovo?
So it's interesting. The motivation is not the same for everyone,
True.
even within the company,
True.
because like you mentioned earlier, everyone's in a different part of the journey.
That's right.
So for some of us, it's that wonderful corporate policy that we have that actually states that products must be accessible, right? So that is the mandate. But for some of us, it's a different experience about the people. We have this incredible partnership with Governor Moorhead School for the Blind.
Yep.
We host a conference for these students every year. As a matter of fact, we're about to have our conference for them next month. In previous years, we've invited them. And one of the things that we heard from our students, right? These are students from the disability community that want to have employment. We want to inspire them to go into tech careers, right? STEM careers. And they want to give us feedback on our products. They want to do product evaluations. And they said to us, we want to tell you what changes you should make to your products to make them more accessible. We want you to take that feedback to the development teams.
Mm-hmm.
And we did just that. We brought them in, we shared a ThinkPad, and we said, what can make this ThinkPad even more accessible? And they gave us feedback. They said, we really want tactile markings embedded into the hardware. So we don't want something that can fall off like a sticker. We want something permanent. And what did we do? We brought in employees from the company to this conference. They engaged with the students. They heard the feedback directly from the students. This builds empathy. Now it makes innovation, design, and accessibility about the people.
Yeah, and it's a great segue into the benefits, because there's also a huge benefit to the bottom line. And a lot of folks, when we started the company, and I had the pleasure of talking with a lot of the folks in the beginning, and you would be surprised on how many things that you heard about, folks that this isn't our target. We don't want to work with people with disabilities. They can't use our products. You heard so many things, which is extremely disheartening. But when you think about the evolution of tech and the evolution of the world we're in, like, I'd put my bottom dollar up against one of those folks any day of the week. And when I think about the benefits, we talk about, there's a revenue benefit, right? So every time there's always a revenue benefit. When you're including everybody, again, you're not just including the people with disabilities, you're including their families, right? You're including their friends. So when it's just like that story, when you go to a restaurant, you have a bad experience, you tell everybody. When you have a good experience, when people are telling people, like Lenovo and all the other brands we work with are doing the right things, they're taking the right steps, they're investing time and effort to make sure that all people have access. It's not only doing the right thing, it's not only empathy, there's a bottom line business benefit to it. So when we talk about the benefits, obviously market penetration, because there's a key differentiation when an organization says we care about all people. We're going to make sure that we don't exclude a single person. And in fact, not just excluding, but we're going to include by making sure that we're doing the right thing, which is the usability side of the testing. Then there's this other piece called strengthening the reputation. I mean, brand reputation matters today, especially in a digital economy. It matters. So when an organization has earned a thing like a VPAT, or they've made a commitment to accessibility, and they have a statement out there, and they're offering products and services that are fully labeled as accessible, that's a reputational benefit. That's a differentiation. Yes, of course, it improves UX. When you talk about websites, it includes, it improves, I don't even know what I was talking about. Oh, it improves, that's the word I'm looking for, usability, but then they don't think about the other side. It also improves organic optimization from an SEO perspective. It improves conversion rates from the site. It improves site visitation and usability. So all those things are factored, but the last thing we always get to is it's the risk mitigation. Because at Abler, we we're not here. We are built for mission. And so we historically haven't really talked about risk mitigation, but that's a big thing. When you think about lawsuits, again, there are companies out there that are talking about that all the time. And that's not something we really want to engage in, but they're facts. Lawsuits have jumped over 700% over the last 3 years. It's not getting any better. There are attorneys out there that are doing things they're potentially tricking people into doing things. It's become a little bit crazy out there today. So let's talk, John, about the benefits too, because I know that there's, aside from reputational management, aside from increased performance, there's just a significant amount of benefits to this that a lot of people just aren't aware of. And so how does Lenovo view the benefits? Because you just kind of said everyone's in a different journey, right? But at the end of the day, the bottom line is it's proven statistically speaking that an inclusive organization that is fully accessible is a more profitable organization.
Yeah, so when we talk about that business case around accessibility, I mean, Ada mentioned the clustering of function keys. And I don't know if people understand what that means. So when you have on the top of those function keys that probably nobody ever uses those, but they're grouped in groups of 4. As a screen reader, someone who's blind, the technology, assistive technology that we're using them all the time. And so not all computers have that clustering. And the same layout, that ThinkPad layout of the keyboard is consistent. And because of that, it's so much more usable for me to get any ThinkPad. I can jump on it. I know what I'm going to expect. I know it's accessible. I know it's usable, and I'm going to be able to be productive right away. And as a result, I started using it in work. When I bought my personal computer at home, I knew where I was going. I was getting my Lenovo ThinkPad. And when I replaced my computer, our company had even changed. It's not because we were, not that because we're partners and we're working together. I mean, for me, the Lenovo ThinkPad is the only computer I want to use. And I share that with anybody and everyone who listens, because I want people to realize that for people who are blind, for us to be successful, we need to find the right tools. And I found the right tool, and I'm spreading that word. But, when I think about it with your team at Lenovo, Ada, you have the product diversity office, you have a usability team. How are you integrating this feedback? I love the fact that you talked about the Governor Moorhead School, but how else are you integrating some of these changes within the organization to make sure that we're seeing that business growth as a result of accessibility?
Our partnership has made such an impact on the business. I talked a little bit about innovation around ThinkPad and adding tactile markers on those keys that control screen readers. And we got that feedback from our students in Governor Moorhead School for the Blind. We also have our user experience software designers created a whole design language that really takes into consideration color contrast and accessibility features. And that, of course, all about that because you helped us with some of that.
It's a great
design.
experience.
So that has been great. And that is aligned with our brand team, another team at Lenovo that you also work with, right? So now when we have banners, we have templates, we have all of this content, right? Visual content, it is actually following accessibility guidelines. It's also changed some of our software experiences, like our CX analytics teams have also worked on improving their sites and internal tools so that they're more accessible. Again, that's another product that your team helped with. There is a missing person from this meeting. Her name is Kim, and she does this incredible job of auditing your site and really going through every bullet point by point and showing you, how to make things more accessible. What are the more critical areas? Put it on a roadmap. These are the things that you should probably work on first. These are the things that are easier to change. And taking all this knowledge, our cloud and software team also went through a similar process, and they did something amazing. They created an accessibility playbook. And what that means, it's a book that lists roles and responsibilities for every member of the team and how they play a role specifically on accessibility. So this has been a huge culture change for us, right? In addition to that, we have not talked too much about innovation. But our team, we've been thinking, how do we create new products? And recently we worked on some new products for video games, for video game accessories for women. And
That's awesome.
Can't share too many details, but they are accessible ideas. There's 3 of them, and we filed 3 patents for these ideas. So talk about accessibility really making a difference for innovation. And then, of course, we have our next UX team, which is a user experience team that
Great
works
team.
on future technologies. And you've worked with
Yeah,
them, right?
love that team.
Even
yeah.
yesterday.
Yeah.
Even
Yeah,
yesterday.
exactly.
So we have teams working on accessibility, not just improving what we already have, but really taking accessibility into account for future technologies, for changes. How do we use it to innovate? Because we do have teams that are inspired by legal requirements. And we do have teams that are inspired by work culture and saying, wow, we are a company that cares about people, that cares about all people, right? And we also have individuals that care about innovation. How do we make something really exciting that really works for everyone? Smarter technology for all, right? So these are all things that come into play when we talk about how do you implement accessibility? Where are you in the maturity level? Well, we're a very big company, so we had teams that are in different levels, but all of these factors really play a role in implementing accessibility.
Excellent. It's kind of a good segue, and I just want to. I'm just keeping an eye on the time every now and then because I know we have limited time. I want to make sure I have some time for questions. But you talked about Kim, and Kim Casey's our director of accessibility, and she's and I say this, she's the best in the business. And she leads a team of analysts, and this kind of dives into sort of one of the benefits of it working with an organization like Enabler. There are lots of different technologies out there today. I know the rage is artificial intelligence, and there's some, and I will say this, there are some great companies out there doing some great things. There's automated tools. A lot of times there's agencies that say, hey, we can do this for you. We'll use an automated tool and we'll do a scan. There's a lot of things out there and a lot of misnomers out there, and sort of there's an importance of manual testing. And every conversation I have, I always kind of go down. There's an automated tool place where typically a lot of the automated tools they're getting better, but they typically pick up 20%, maybe 30% of the violation pool. So when you start thinking about universal experiences, it's sort of a baseline. Yes, it's something, but it doesn't mean the individual with disabilities can actually use the site still. So that it's helpful, yes. Then you have the automated tools, which again, they're all the rage. And a lot of times these automated tools aren't accessible themselves. They are very cool. Some of them are very cool, but in reality is they're not really creating universal experiences. And so again, it's sort of one of those things. It's, are we in this game or are we not in this game? And it's really about the inclusion aspects of all humans, not just doing something just to say that I'm making an effort, which is good. And we're grateful for that. We really are. But it's doing it the right way. And so this leads me into this importance of manual testing piece and the segue with Kim. When you think about manual testing traditionally, when you compare in comparison to 20% or 30% or even 40% or even 50% of the violation pools, and the violation pools are in essence, those are the critical issues that are identified based on the standards of whether it be, Section 508, Title II through the ADA or WCAG, which is the Global Accessibility Guidelines Standard. But they are only picking up a small percentage of the violations. And so we always talk about universal design. There's universal design. That's just universal. So in order to get to that, in order to achieve that, the only real way today, and I think is through manual testing, and that's having human beings that are certified accessibility analysts that have passed their trusted tester exams, they earned their CPAC accreditation, and they live and breathe in this assistant technology every day. So what better person to actually determine where the issues are than an individual with a disability who's a certified analyst who lives and breathes it every day. So when we talk about the importance of manual testing, and John, I kind of want to lay this over to you for a second, then you can pass it over to Tate as well. But why isn't it not enough? I mean, other than what I just said, but why is it not enough? Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, I know. I think when we think about the technology solutions, people promising, compliance with our widget, promising compliance with our overlays and these type of things. It goes back to those human experiences. And, I do think there's going to be a place for AI. I think AI is going to really make an impact on the way developers are going to be creating digital content
Agreed.
and the way that they are going to be incorporating accessibility at the code level. But it goes back to that human in the loop. We need to be thinking about, having humans in there to make sure that what the AI is doing is going to be actually creating those experiences that we want. And who better than actual people with lived experiences being that human, right? Being that human in the loop with a disability. Because they're the ones who are going to be able to make sure that it's not just accessible, but it's going to be usable. And that's what our team really has been focused about. Just not making sure it's accessible, but making sure that everybody's going to be able to use it in the way that it was meant to be, just like for everyone else. And, Ada, you've been working with our team and working with analysts and who have disabilities, and you have individuals on your own team. You've been intentional about making sure that you have people with lived experiences on your team. What have you learned about that inclusion of having their voices at the table, providing feedback on your products?
It cannot be replaced. And this is part of the reason that we make sure that we stay in touch with our community and that we have really diverse user testing. And when we do user testing, we make sure that we include individuals with disabilities. We also make sure that every year we run a study around disability. We pick a different area and we really do some exploratory research. What are the pain points? How can we create better technologies that really meet the needs of these individuals? But it's really important to have individuals with lived experiences for to employ them, to have that in your user testing and also in our partnerships, right? So all of these things we're talking about being inclusive. It has to be, you have to think about how are we being inclusive in all of our behaviors as we develop products. How are we communicating with the community? Are we including members with disability, the disability community in these touch points? Our user testing, are we including individuals of different backgrounds? And again, just keeping it, it's important because you can just look at a line of code, but it's very different to look at a line of code than to actually, have a dependency on the product and then experience a problem that you can move past. And if you don't hear all these different voices, you might miss something really important.
Yeah, one of the things that's really interesting too, and I'll go back to a little bit, is, well, two things. One, I think there's automated tools and AI have a place. There's no doubt. And I think most of the AI companies that we've worked with have said the same thing. You've got to be a manual testing. You've got to have manual testing. And I think in terms of an overlay, I think these overlays can be very effective once the manual testing has been complete, the audit is complete, the validation is complete. These tools can be supportive. And we have partners that are in these areas as well. So I again, I go back to the importance of the usability aspects of it. And it's a hard thing to say, but it's putting people first. And that really what it's about. And that leads me to thinking, when I met John for the first time, and I'll be the first to tell you, and I think this is one of the things about education is, you don't always run into folks with visual impairments. You don't always run into folks with white canes. You don't always run into folks with accessibility dogs or wheelchairs. But it doesn't mean they don't exist, and they don't exist in the masses. And oftentimes we have a tendency of being in our own world and not really having the empathetic perspective of others. And I've been there, and I often can slip into that. But in reality, it is a market. It's a business market. It's a massive market. And so when you start to think about how really important this really is, again, a billion people. And oftentimes we don't think we're one accident away from being in a wheelchair. We're one year away from my vision going more downhill. I mean, we're all sort of growing into a disability. So we all, to some degree, have them or will have them. And I think it's ironic in a lot of ways that we often turn our attention to something else because we don't want to face that reality. But it's a reality, and we're all approaching it, and we're all a second away from it. And so I think that even makes it even more important that when we think about everything we do, and this isn't necessarily goes down the DEI topic, this is about access. This is about accessibility and ensuring the content that people use every single day have the access to perform it. So whether it's in the banking industry, whether you're in an association or a museum or a product company or an e-commerce, it doesn't matter. People need to have access. And so one of the things I wanted to just kind of jump into a little bit here is sort of this, like, there's a bunch of misnomers out there. right? A lot of people ask questions like, accessibility is automated, right? Or my agency can do it. So one of the things we hear all the time, and look, and that's no disrespect to agencies. There's some incredible agencies. I spent 25 years in advertising. I get it. I've been there, but I think it's important now than ever, especially when you start thinking about some of the new Title II changes and some of the accountability. Ultimately, agencies are responsible now. So if an organization is promising accessible content and they're not getting it and they get sued, it's not just the company now that's responsible, it's the agency as well. So I think it's important now than ever that agencies, that web development companies, that accessibility companies, that organizations all work together to make sure that we're doing the right thing for all people. So John, in terms of some of these misnomers that you've heard over the time, right? Agencies handle it, it's too expensive, it's too difficult. We don't have customers with disabilities, which I chuckle a little bit. Let's talk about that. What are some of the things that you've heard, John, over the years? And then I'd love to hear Ada's perspective on that as well.
No, I mean, all three of those things you talked about. No customers with disabilities. I mean, there's not many of them out there. I mean, there's 20% of the population identifies with having a disability, then add in their family and friends, and that number gets closer to 50% of the population. And I know that, if I'm having trouble shopping out there, I'm not going to come back. I'm not going to be going to your website. If I have trouble applying for a job, I'm not applying for jobs, but, we have candidates. They're not going back. And
are you applying for jobs, John?
And they're not telling our candidates. It's really interesting. Our candidates in our workforce development program have been, we looked and said, how long does it take you to apply for a job? And the jobs that take more than 30 minutes, they're not going to apply. And so, I think it's really important that we focus on accessibility, going back to that human experience and getting the right talent, because the more you get talent like with individuals with disabilities, the more people are going to come to your business. And I think we need to be really focusing on that business case of including people with disabilities in the workforce, because they're going to be spending more money.
Mm-hmm.
And if we can create more accessible experiences for them,
and more jobs, which leads to more spending,
exactly.
Which is, again, if we think about the revenue perspective, which I don't love to think about, but that's a reality.
I mean, I think we can't. I mean, it is reality.
It is,
right?
Yep.
I mean, more money doesn't mean more problems. It means more money.
DIG right now,
that's
what Johnny says.
And that's what we're going to talk about. It's like, I really think that with more money is going to come, more spending, and it's going to really drive, what people want right now. Businesses are looking for an impact on their bottom line. And there's nothing wrong against that. We're all looking at that. But I think you can do good and do well at the same time. So Ada, I mean, I love to get your perspective on, what you've been seeing yourself.
So one of the interesting questions that I've come across is, well, if you have a visual impairment, do you really need a monitor? And, and again, it's about that knowledge gap, right? It's, well, if visual impairment does not mean completely blind. There are,
That's
different
right.
degrees
That's
of
right.
vision.
I didn't know that. Actually, I thought if you were blind, you were blind. There's a significant amount. Yeah, it's a spectrum, a very large spectrum.
That's right. And if you have some vision, guess what? You're going to want to use it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where having a minimum brightness on your displays, that's where it comes in, making sure that your displays work with magnifiers. And there's just a lot of things to take into consideration, adding certain audio feedback to your displays as well, right?
And
Because
the keyboard functionality, how folks with visual impairments function on a site and how it was built.
But this is the best one, and I'm going to let John answer. This is the best one. Okay, so I'm going to make my site accessible. How accessible does it need to be? I need a percentage. 60, 70, 80. How do I pass?
I'd love to answer that
Well,
one.
that's a really interesting question. To be honest, we'd love to have 100%, but we don't need 100%. I need to have, get me to that 60, 80%, because, I just want to be able to use it. I want to be able to get that experience. I want to be able to navigate without having, an issue. I want those call to actions. I want to be able to do that same thing. And, and again, I understand that organizations are going to be working on different pieces, but if I can see those changes happening, I can see it going on, I'll come back. But, if I can't, if I come there and I don't see a skip link, or if I can't just use headings to navigate quickly, because I'm busy. I got
Or
to
the
get
abyss, John.
I got to
which-
get in and out. And but yeah, I mean, and I guess I'm sure it's a different answer for different people, but for me, get me somewhere and I'll get there.
Yeah, and we do. One of the things we do as an organization, which is always shocking to a lot of companies, is we do these accessibility scorecards because it's good to get a sense of. Because a lot of people don't know. It's like, well, where am I? I think I'm good. I mean, we use this automated tool. It says I'm scoring a 70%. I've been told here, and so a lot of times it's a shock because we go through and we do a scorecard with a human being and with our own methodology. And a lot of times an organization will say, well, we're at 80% and we scored you at a 40. And again, it's not a bad thing. It's a reality. I mean, even today, after we've been doing this for almost 5 years, I think it's still 93% of all content globally is still not accessible. And so we're creating so much content, and we're trying to remediate the stuff we have, and it's hard to keep up. And so I think, again, with the education, the awareness, the human testing, all those things can help us get there. At the same time, when you're actually in the process of wanting to build a new website, that's one of the most important things is don't build the site and then go backwards. Bring in an organization to help you build along the way. Same with products, build along the way. So between your sprints, you're doing QA and you're testing accessibility. So when you're ready to go live, you're going live and launching with a fully accessible and usable website. But back to these scorecards, it's an insight. And that insight isn't a bad thing. It's about sharing with you where your current state is. And I always say, look, in reality is the manual testing side, we believe strongly we can get up in the high 90 percentile. Now, again, a lot of that boils back to the resources, the effort from the team, how far you can go. But 90% is a good score. And I typically look for that when that's kind of where, and anything below an 85 or an 80, there's different options to help. But I think my position on the scores, to me, it's all or not all or nothing, but I look at it as let's just make it usable. A lot of people go, well, we score an 80. Is that good? I think we're simplifying it too much. And I think if again, it goes back to the empathy. It goes back to the opportunity to create universal experiences from the get-go or remediate them and get them there. But it's not about a score. It's about an intention, and it's about an outcome. And so that would be my answer on that. I know you didn't ask me, but I was going to give it to you anyway. So I know we got about 2 minutes left. This has been a really good conversation. I hope everyone watching is enjoying it as well. As Andrew said, this is sort of a new format. A couple of things, John, I want to kind of, before I thank everyone, I want to kind of leave a couple sort of closing remarks. Obviously, from our perspective, accessibility is just way more than compliance. And we understand, in reality, budgeting can be challenging if it's not been discussed. And in terms of some of these new regulations that are coming out, John, and sort of this vision for this real inclusive future as it relates to accessibility, what are your thoughts? And then give me a couple of closing remarks, and then we'll do a little thank you and kick everybody off. Well, we'll get into questions. Sorry, I forgot about that part, Andrew.
No, I really think keeping it simple. Remember, it's not about a line of code. It's about human experiences. And I think as we start to move into this, move from a knowledge economy to an innovation economy, I think if you're not thinking about accessibility, you're gonna really fall behind. And so you really need to start to disrupt yourself, because if you don't disrupt yourself and think about accessibility, you're going to get disrupted and you're going to be missing out on a lot of new business that's out there. When I was in my career, I spent a lot of time in Africa, and I grew up saying Africa was the final frontier. But I really do believe that the disability community is the final frontier in terms of business and lost market. And so if you really want to be, identifying those new, revenue sources and really kind of getting that, really think about the disability community. How can you best create those experiences? And I think if you do that and focus on really making sure that you can create a usable experience, that someone can come to your site or use your products, they're going to keep coming back. And I think if you can just really kind of have that focus, it's going to make a world of difference.
Amen. Amen. Ada, anything else you want to add?
I'm going to go back to that percentile. Because if you score an 80 and you can't move through the site, it doesn't matter that you
Amen.
scored
I
an
agree
80.
with that too.
So
You know,
yes, it's it's progress over perfection, right?
I
Yes.
agree. And and it's a commitment, just like it is a commitment to SEO or analytics or AI. It's a commitment as part of the equation. And that's what it should be as part of the equation. So, all right, with that being said, Andrea, do we have any questions? Okay, Alex, if you can buzz me in, or I'll go ahead and repeat
Yes.
those. Oh,
Can you
there you
hear
go.
me?
I can hear you, sir. Yes.
Awesome. So we have one question from Minnie from Wake County. Can you please tell me when humans with disabilities are testing software, in parentheses, not web pages, what are some easy to fix issues that they discover? Thank you.
Well,
You want to take that, John?
yeah, I'll answer that. It's great to hear from Minnie. And when I think about, you know, when somebody with a screen reader is coming to a website, and it's really interesting. We've been working with our students in our workforce development program recently. We've been doing these capstone projects, and for an individual using a screen reader, when they come, heading structure is something that's so important to them. Because it's a way that they navigate a website to be able to get the information in a website in a very quick way. And I think that's one thing that organizations can actually do is fix that heading structure. And what that means is often individual organizations use fonts and different type of text for those using the kind of as their heading structures. But if you really think about it and understand how somebody who's blind is actually navigating your website and how they use your website, you'll realize that we use heading structures as a way, as an outline for us on your website. And it was really interesting to hear how important that was for every single individual in our cohort who was just, that's their main focus. It's like, that's how I navigate a website. So, and that's a pretty easy fix. I think that's something that you can do right away. Make sure that you have an H1, H2, and so forth. And it's a really easy fix that everybody can start with, and it can make a really big difference. And Ada, I'd love your opinion on that too.
So since you mentioned software
I'm so sorry.
outside
Yes.
of sites, I would go back to alt text.
Mhm.
Make sure that you're describing images and that your descriptions are not too long so that they're digestible. As a science teacher, I created some descriptions on scientific diagrams. They were very long descriptions, and I had to really reconsider that and trim it down so that if you're talking about the water cycle, you're not talking about every step in too much detail, but enough to get the content out, the message out, but it's digestible. So that's one tip to make software more accessible is think about your alt text and your descriptions.
But I think you have to understand why alt text having shorter is because once you understand how a screen reader
works.
is
Yep.
coming over and using it, I mean, we are quickly going in and we need to gather as much the key information rather than a ton of information.
Yeah, and I just got another question in about the WCAG. That is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. That's a global standard. And a couple of things that are important to note too is related to that. The WCAG has multiple layers. Right now, the standard is a 2.2 AA. I believe there'll be a 2.3 coming out at some point. But there are 13 checkpoints and 82 guidelines. So a lot of times when we get in these conversations about the ADA, and a lot of times it's, the ADA was created, I think, 30 years ago. And I think it was last updated, outside of Title II recently, was updated when the iPhone came out, which I think we're on 16. So the checkpoints, the WCAG was created as a global standard to ensure, again, global accessibility best practices. Another thing just too, I'll mention, we kind of mentioned VPAT in the beginning. The VPAT is what is called a voluntary product accessibility template. It's a template, but what in essence it includes is an accessibility conformance report. And really that's sort of like we call it sort of a certification in the moment. It's sort of like a document that evaluates your due diligence, sort of all the aspects of the content and the design and the code that you've tested in sort of a pass-fail kind of scenario. That document, it was once part of the Section 508 through the ADA, and now is becoming more of a global standard. So other organizations, other countries and continents are adapting the VPAT now as a standard. And so when you start to think about from a business perspective, once you can achieve and earn that VPAT, you'll start to evaluate partnerships and vendors a little bit different as well. So a lot of times organizations will have a website, they'll have different plugins and different platforms. They'll focus on getting their content where it needs to be. Unfortunately, they can't control the content of the third party. And so as you start to evaluate, having organizations that actually come to the table with a VPAT is starting to become more of a norm now. You'll start to see that more in the RFP process. So great question. Thank you. Yep, we have another question. Yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so this one is from Dave Shepley with Design Hammer. We've collaborated on several successful sites together, but I still often run into clients who either rely on a conflated lighthouse score to avoid investing or just say that they're not worried about getting sued. What have you been telling people recently to move them past that naive mindset?
That's a great question, Dave. Nice to have you here, buddy. You know, the hard part for me, I guess specifically, is it's the source of the content, and ultimately what you're evaluating it against. And so, if you're evaluating it against Section 508 practices, you know, again, we go back to compliance. If we're evaluating it towards usability and true accessibility through the manual testing lens, we're looking at the WCAG. And again, when you start to look at that, that's what we score against. So again, 13 checkpoints, 82 guidelines. I think I'm saying that right. That is a massive amount of evaluation that needs to be taken. So again, at the end of the day, a lot of it, when you hear somebody say they're not worried about being sued, you know, those are hard conversations to have, because I can tell you we don't talk a lot about that, but we have helped multiple organizations work through those processes. And you know, when you do get sued, I can tell you, I won't say any names, but it can cost well into the $20,000 range just to settle. And that's not even including legal fees. So when you start to think about, and then the reputational components that go along with it and the disruption to the organization as well. So there's, that's not necessarily, you know, the right mindset in my opinion. But at the same time, there are real practical issues with getting sued. And it's not really something you want to experience. So that would kind of be my answer to that question.
There's a little more to it than just that, right?
Yes.
If you're a global company and let's say you sell in the European market,
Yeah, absolutely right.
right? If you're not following, I call it WCAG 2.2, right?
I call it WCAG, but yeah, it's okay. I don't know what WCAG. How about that?
Yes. Then you can easily get locked out of the European market.
That's correct. That's from a global standard. You're right. The European Union has rolled out all new standards. And so the U.S. is, you know, again, John, you probably know a little bit more. I know you've been putting a lot of time against this, but talk just a little bit about the European Union, because they're taking it very seriously. There are heavy fines associated with it. There are timelines that they need to comply with. And it doesn't just talk about, you know, your front-facing consumer website. It's your PDF it's your documentation, which a lot of organizations have tons of PDFs. It's your mobile applications. It's your games. It's every piece of digital content. It's your credentialed experiences. So if you're a bank, again, you might have a front-facing website that's accessible, but your credentialed experiences are not. So it opens up the door to all content. And the European Union, I applaud them for, and hopefully we are working our way there. But John, talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, no, I think it's, as you talk about, they're requiring this, and that requirement, and it has a, bite. I think that's one of those things. It's like sometimes we have some of these regulations and guidelines and there's no bite behind it. And when you get that bite behind it, people are going to actually act on it. It goes back to, you talk about those scores, those artificial scores, and Ada, I think you hit it on the head, right? Artificial scores don't mean anything. It's all about that. It's about the usability. And if you're going to be, not making sure that you can have people come and shop or use your products, again, you're going to miss out on business. And, we talk about EU. They're going to make sure that all people are going to be able to access. And that's something we need to be looking at as an example, because that's where the world's going.
Agreed. Okay, well, I don't know if we have any questions, but I think we have to wrap. If there are any more, please send them our way. We'll get it. But I want to thank everyone for being part of this today. NC Tech, great partnership. If you didn't get a hold of it later, make sure you visit the website. Very grateful for your partnership. Lenovo, obviously, Ada, thank you so much for being here. Very grateful. Live from the Perch Studios in Morrisville as well. We appreciate everybody here. And Johnny Sams, thanks for being here. But we appreciate y'all joining. Hopefully you'll share this content out. Hopefully this was a great experience for everybody, an educational one that hopefully will change the lives of others. So tk you all for being here. Abler, appreciate you. Have a wonderful day, guys. Thank you.
Thank you.